Two recent shock polls could and should devastate Donald Trump's chances of winning the upcoming election. The real question, of course, is will they? But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, I've got a couple of clips and a couple of polls to show you. But before I do, I want to remind you, this weekend I'm flying to Las Vegas, Nevada, in order to canvass and door knock to try to get out the vote. I'm going to be working with the community of liberal streamer Destiny to do it. This is going to be a coin flip election based on the data. So every possible vote in every possible state counts. You can make the difference. So if you're an eligible voter, please make a plan to vote. If you're an eligible voter who is not registered to vote, many states still permit you to do same day voter registration. So you could go to the polls, potentially, register to vote, and vote. Please check and see if you're eligible to do so and make a plan to vote because, again, it matters. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Catherine Rampell is a Washington Post columnist and a CNN contributor, and her profile's increased over the past several weeks because she's been going on these CNN panels and kicking MAGA's ass in debates. And it happens here, and it's relevant to the poll I'm about to show you because she squares off with Kevin O'Leary, a multimillionaire conservative investor, an entrepreneur who's in the Shark Tank, for Trump, even though he pretends not to be. And the question is, how many Americans think that Donald Trump is a fascist? That's relevant to this clip, and it's relevant to the poll. So we're going to play it, unpack it together.
It's old news. The Jan 6 deal has been in the market forever. This rhetoric from people saying Trump is a Nazi and a fascist in the market forever. Do you really want to spend your closing statements on old stuff that's already needled into 45% of the country that hates him?
Is it old news, is he also now running to? I mean, the problem, it would be old news if he was not running to be president.
Except think about what you're trying to replace. You're trying to tell somebody.
Always relevant.
You should care more about Nazi Trump than the cost of gasoline, your rent, and the protein you buy for
that
family.
That is literally the argument. Okay,
and I think that's a losing argument.
The argument is you should care more about whether the president of the United States is a fascist and admires Nazis than you should about the cost
really
of gasoline
believes that.
today. You don't think that's fair?
A lot of Americans believe that.
I don't think so. I really don't.
I think the argument is.
So Kevin O'Leary says he doesn't think that Americans think that Donald Trump is a fascist. He doesn't think that. Well, he's wrong. And again, we'll get to the poll, but I want to play this last part from Catherine Rampell.
You should care if he's a Nazi.
Yeah.
Yes. You should care if he's pro all sorts of other authoritarians like Viktor Orban and Putin and various others. That's all relevant. But even if you don't care about those things, even if you're more interested in pocketbook issues, he's still not going to be good for your pocketbook.
If I could
So that last part about how Donald Trump is really not going to be good for your pocketbook, we'll come back to that too, because that's relevant. But let's get to Kevin O'Leary. He says, listen, Donald Trump, fascist, most Americans don't think that. Nobody thinks that, except they do, right? So ABC News and Ipsos just released this devastating poll, which shows that 49% of Americans, nearly half of Americans, think that Donald Trump is a fascist. Okay, so 44% think that Trump alone is a fascist. And then when you count the 5% that think, for whatever reason, that Kamala Harris is a fascist too, and Trump both, then it brings it to 49%. 49% think that Donald Trump is a fascist. And he's also basically, according to the data, 50% likely to win the American presidency. That's where we are. Now, 32% say neither of them are fascists, and only 18% say that Kamala Harris is a fascist, which again is about 18 percentage points too high. But nearly 50% of Americans, 49%, say that Donald Trump is a fascist. So Kevin O'Leary is just objectively wrong on that score. Of course, the obvious question is, will it make a difference? Well, it hasn't so far. Because again, Donald Trump's support is basically holding steady. He is a serious contender for the White House based on the data that we've seen. I will remind you, though, that it's not just CNN contributors, Catherine Rampell, pondering politics. It's not just us on the left, or those of us who are liberals and progressives, calling Trump a fascist, even though I would say that that's sufficient, given that he is. It's also Donald Trump's own former second in command, his chief of staff in the White House, General John Kelly.
Certainly, the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Wow. His own former conservative veteran general chief of staff said that Donald Trump is a fascist, joining his former Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, his former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. So that's three top American generals who served in Donald Trump's administration in various capacities, calling Trump a fascist, and reflected by 49% of the American electorate. And it's still a coin flip election. Wow. I should also say that poll was conducted before the revelation of General Kelly's audio recordings, where he also agreed that Trump is a fascist. Food for thought. Another clip of Catherine Rampell here about another shock poll, which should devastate Trump as well. And Catherine Rampell lays it out.
The table. What is fascinating about that is that this is one of those things where you look at people's views and they're blind on whose name is attached to the views.
Right.
And tell us more about what it found.
So YouGov, the polling organization, polled Americans on 130 or so policies from both of the candidates, and didn't tell the survey respondents whose policies were whose. And they asked people, do you like it? Do you dislike it? And the general finding was that Kamala Harris's agenda was head and shoulders much more popular than Trump's. Almost all of her policies got majority support.
That is staggering. So a blind survey where you can't associate the particular policy, at least obviously, with party, and certainly not with candidate, it benefits Harris. Voters prefer Harris's agenda to Trump's. They just don't realize it. Take our quiz. And it gives you an opportunity to try the quiz as well. As presidential candidates, Kamala Harris and Trump are neck and neck in polls. But if the race were solely about their policies, Harris would win handily. That's because voters, whether they know it or not, overwhelmingly prefer the vice president's agenda to the former president's. And so again, it gives you an example just of 8 policy proposals, based on this quiz, and it was about 130 total, according to YouGov / WAPO. So if you look, support for Harris's proposals, the vast majority of them have more than 50% approval rating. Most of them, the vast majority, are above that 50% line, whereas only half of Trump's are. That is a staggering asymmetry, okay? The vast majority, the overwhelming majority, virtually all of Harris's policy proposals are popular. Only half of Trump's are. It's a staggering figure. Nearly all of Harris's policy proposals received majority support among registered voters. Only half of Trump's did. But his pander palooza paid off. That newish Social Security idea is his most popular policy proposal overall. Hers most popular idea, meanwhile, is a border security measure. These are their least popular ideas. Reducing regulation on cryptocurrency, that's Trump's least popular idea. Increasing the number of refugees admitted into the United States, 32% support, which actually 8% higher than Trump's least popular policy proposal. This is staggering. Between the fact that the overwhelming majority of Americans prefer Harris's policies and 50% of Americans think Trump is a fascist, this should be a landslide election. It just goes to show the institutional advantages, both politically and in the media, for Trump, and the partisanship which has really infused this country. Because I guarantee you, if you then made the survey unblind, right? You actually attach names and parties to it, the results would waver. And we see this in terms of perceptions in the economy. Nobel Prize winning economist Paul Krugman has done research about this, where perceptions of the economy change depending on who's in office. They flip pretty dramatically. And even though Democrats do it too, it's even more pronounced, much more pronounced among the Republicans. Meaning, if Trump were president in this economy, the sentiment, the approval rating for the economy would be considerably higher, especially for Republicans, because it's about partisanship. So these two shock polls, again, could and should end Donald Trump's candidacy. Will they? Honestly, probably not. It's going to be a nail biter until the very end, and that's tragic. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.